What if I told you there are giant pictures hidden in the desert, so big that you can only see them from the sky? These shapes stretch across the dry land of southern Peru, carved into the ground more than 1,000 years ago. For centuries, no one understood who made them or why. From the ground, they look like simple paths or scratches in the soil, but from above, they form animals, plants, and strange symbols too perfect to be accidents. Long before airplanes or satellites, the Nazca people created something so large and mysterious that it still amazes us today. The desert here is one of the driest places on Earth. The sun burns, the wind sculpts the land, and years pass without a single drop of rain. Yet, in this empty land, the Nazca chose to leave their mark, not with stone temples or huge statues, but with lines carved into the desert floor. These images, called geoglyphs, remained hidden in plain sight, waiting for humans to gain the power of flight to reveal their full meaning. Even now, researchers ask the same question people asked long ago. Why did a people fighting to survive in such a harsh land create drawings that could only be seen from above? The Nazca people more than 2,000 years ago, before roads, planes, or modern machines, the Nazca people built their world in one of the hardest places to live. Their land was trapped between the tall Andes Mountains and the cold Pacific Ocean, a desert so dry that it seemed empty of life. Rain could vanish for years, and the sun burned hotter than fire. Yet, instead of giving up, the Nazca adapted. They learned to read the land, to work with it, and to shape it into something that could support life. From about 100 BCE to 800 CE, the Nazca lived across valleys cut by small rivers. They created villages instead of huge cities, but these villages were tied together by shared customs and strong cultural identity. What they lacked in size, they made up for in creativity. Their pottery was bright and full of stories about gods, animals, and spirits. Their fabrics showed both real and imaginary creatures, woven with the same care they used for survival. The Nazca were more than survivors, they were engineers and artists. They dug deep underground water systems called puquios, turning dry soil into fertile farmland. Corn, beans, squash, peanuts, and cotton grew where dust once ruled. Their culture was not just about living day to day. It was about building, believing, and creating in the heart of the desert. Life in harsh lands, the desert the Nazca called home was not gentle. It was a land where mistakes meant death. There were no steady rains to count on, no wide rivers to give water freely, and no forests to provide shade or food. The sun scorched the ground by day, and cold winds swept across it at night. Yet the Nazca did not see only danger here. They saw a challenge to master. They understood that survival would not come from luck, but from knowledge and skill. Beneath the hard, dry surface of the desert, they discovered hidden water. Instead of shallow wells, they created ingenious spiral tunnels called puquios. These spirals reached underground aquifers and pulled water to the surface. From there, a network of underground canals carried life, giving water to their fields. Even today, some of these systems still work, proving how advanced their engineering was. With water secured, the Nazca turned sand into farmland. Fields of corn, beans, squash, and cotton grew in neat rows. Their crops fed families, supported trade, and allowed them to thrive where few would dare to live. Every harvest was a victory against the desert, and every field was proof that human creativity could bend nature's hardest rules. Hidden water systems for the Nazca, water was the difference between life and death. In a desert where rain could disappear for years, they could not wait for nature's kindness. Instead, they engineered their own miracle. Beneath the lifeless sand, they found underground rivers, and from this discovery came the puquios, spiral-shaped wells that remain one of their greatest achievements. A puquio looked like a winding staircase dug into the earth. The spiral shape was not for decoration. It let air flow into the tunnels and pushed water upward. At the bottom, these spirals connected to underground canals, carrying water to fields and villages. It was like unlocking a secret river beneath the desert. What made it remarkable is that many of these puquios are still working after more than 1,000 years. Through this system, the Nazca turned dry valleys into fertile farmland. Corn, beans, peanuts, squash, and cotton grew where only dust had ruled before. Their canals gave life not just to crops, but to an entire culture that thrived in one of the most hostile places on Earth. Survival here was not luck, it was brilliance. The hidden water systems were proof that the Nazca were master engineers far ahead of their time. Farming in the desert, once the Nazca unlocked the secret of water, the desert changed. Dry, cracked earth turned into farmland, and food began to grow where only dust storms had ruled before. With their puquios and underground canals, the Nazca created green fields in the middle of the barren land. They planted corn, beans, squash, peanuts, and cotton. These crops gave them both food to survive and materials to trade. Cotton, for example, became vital for weaving their colorful textiles. Every harvest was more than just survival. It was a triumph over nature itself. Their farming proved that even in one of the harshest places on Earth, people could thrive with planning and skill. The Nazca arranged their fields carefully, making sure not to waste a drop of water. Each crop had a role. Corn and beans fed families, squash stored well, peanuts added protein, and cotton supported their art and daily life. Their fields were not endless like those of Egypt or Mesopotamia, but they were powerful symbols of human determination. The desert was unforgiving, yet the Nazca found a way to bend it to their need. Farming in the desert showed their resilience, their creativity, and their ability to turn survival into prosperity. Art and pottery, the Nazca were not only engineers, they were also artists who poured meaning into everything they created. Their pottery and textiles were more than tools or decorations. They were messages, stories, and symbols of their world. Brightly painted pots carried images of gods, animals, plants, and spirits. Some showed real creatures like hummingbirds or fish, while others displayed mythical beings with wings, fangs, or masks. Every detail had purpose, telling stories of life, faith, and imagination. Their pottery was bold in color. Reds, yellows, blacks, and whites stood out against the desert's monotone earth. Each piece revealed how they viewed the balance between people, nature, and the divine. Just like their irrigation canals, their fabrics were works of genius. Woven with cotton from their fields, the textiles were covered in figures of animals, both real and imagined. Art for the Nazca was not just beauty, it was belief. Pots and fabrics were carried into ceremonies, used as offerings, and buried with the dead. They linked the living to their gods, the present to the afterlife. To look at a Nazca pot is to see a world where survival and spirituality were joined, and where even the smallest object told the story of an entire people. Cahuachi Ceremonial Center. At the heart of Nazca culture stood Cahuachi, a sacred gathering place unlike any city we know. It was not built for daily life with busy streets or homes. Instead, it was a ceremonial center, a holy stage where the spiritual life of the Nazca people came alive. Located near the Nazca River, Cahuachi stretched across the desert with pyramids, temples, and wide-open plazas. People from across the valleys traveled here for rituals, festivals, and offerings. They brought painted masks, musical instruments, and fine pottery, objects that archaeologists still find buried in the sands today. These treasures reveal a society deeply tied to religion and tradition. Cahuachi was where prayers rose to the gods for water, crops, and fertility, where music and dance connected humans to the forces that ruled their lives. It was not just stone and earth, it was a symbol. In this holy center, the Nazca joined together as one people, sharing ceremonies that reinforced their identity. Every ritual, every gathering, was an expression of faith and survival. Cahuachi was the beating heart of their culture, the place where community and spirituality became one. Songs, dances, and gods. In the sacred grounds of Cahuachi, the Nazca people expressed their deepest beliefs through music, dance, and offerings to the gods. Life in the desert depended on forces they could not control: rain, crops, fertility of the land. So their rituals were a way of honoring and pleading with the powers that ruled their world. Every song carried meaning. Every step of a dance connected them to the divine. Masks carved with fierce faces, flutes and drums, and brightly painted pottery were used in ceremonies that brought the community together. These gatherings were not quiet moments of prayer, but powerful celebrations where sound and movement filled the desert air. People sang to honor the spirits of water and earth. They danced to ask for fertility of their crops, and they offered gifts to keep balance between humans and gods. For the Nazca, religion was not separate from daily life, it was woven into survival itself. The rituals at Cahuachi tied their people together, gave strength to their identity, and turned their harsh desert into a sacred stage. Through songs and dances, they gave voice to their hopes, fears, and gratitude, believing that every performance echoed into the realm of the gods. The first desert lines around the holy center of Cahuachi, something began to appear that set the Nazca apart from every other ancient culture. Across the flat desert floor, strange shapes and lines stretched for kilometers. At first glance, they seemed too perfect to be natural. Long straight paths, sweeping curves, and vast geometric designs appeared as if drawn with tools the Nazca should not have had. Some were simple tracks, while others formed complex images of animals, plants, and spirals so large they could only be fully understood from above. These were not random scratches in the earth. The Nazca carefully removed the dark stones covering the desert surface to reveal the lighter soil beneath. This simple but genius method turned the desert itself into a giant canvas. Because rain and wind were rare, the designs remained visible for centuries. It was almost as if the desert agreed to guard their secrets. To those on the ground, the lines looked like paths or markings, but from the surrounding hills, and centuries later, from the sky, their full shapes came alive. These were the first steps in one of history's greatest mysteries: why a people who never flew created drawings that could only be fully seen from above. Shapes seen from above, from the ground, the Nazca lines often looked like nothing more than paths or shallow marks in the soil. But from above, their true forms were revealed. Enormous figures of hummingbirds, spiders, monkeys, and even spirals and trapezoids stretched across the desert. Some lines ran perfectly straight for kilometers, while others curved into precise circles and sweeping arcs. The scale was so massive that only a bird's eye view could capture the full picture. This was the great mystery. How did the Nazca create shapes that could not be appreciated from where they stood? They had no airplanes, no satellites, not even a way to climb high enough to see the entire design. Yet their work showed perfect proportions and flawless geometry. To early pilots flying over southern Peru in the 20th century, the sight was unbelievable. These were not random markings of a lost people, but intentional creations made with planning and skill. The Nazca had transformed the desert into an art gallery for the sky. Whether meant for gods above, spirits of the land, or for messages lost to time, the shapes remain one of history's greatest puzzles. Pictures in the sand that only reveal themselves when seen from the heavens. How lines were made, the Nazca Desert was more than empty land, it was a canvas. The people discovered that under the top layer of dark, sunburned stones lay pale yellow soil. By scraping away the darker rocks in careful paths, they exposed the lighter earth beneath, creating sharp contrasts like chalk on a board. This simple method gave birth to lines that stayed clean and visible for centuries. What made their work astonishing was the precision. Some lines stretched straight for kilometers without a single bend. Spirals curled smoothly inward, circles were perfectly round, and animal figures kept their balance across massive spaces. Such accuracy was not possible by guesswork. The Nazca used wooden stakes as markers, ropes pulled tight to guide straight edges, and even grid systems to scale small drawings into huge geoglyphs. Like artists enlarging a sketch, they turned tiny designs into desert-sized masterpieces. They worked without ever seeing the full image from above, relying on measurements, memory, and discipline. With nothing more than posts, ropes, and planning, they created works that still amaze engineers today. These were not rough scratches, but deliberate, flawless creations. Proof of the Nazca's genius in turning the harsh desert into their eternal gallery. The desert preserves them in most places on Earth. A design scratched into the ground would vanish within years. Rain, wind, and shifting soil would erase it quickly. But the Nazca were lucky, or perhaps wise, in choosing their canvas. The desert they lived in is one of the driest places on the planet. It almost never rains, and the air is so calm that even the wind rarely stirs the soil. Because of this, the lines they carved over 500 years ago are still visible today, almost untouched by time. The dark stones on the surface, once removed, revealed lighter soil that did not shift easily. Without water to wash it away, the pale earth kept its form. The desert became a silent guardian, preserving the Nazca's art as if it were frozen in time. For centuries, people walked across these lines without realizing they were part of something far greater. From ground level, they looked like simple paths or roads, blending into the land. It was only when humans took to the skies that the true scale of the Nazca lines was revealed. Their survival is not magic but perfect conditions. The desert itself became a museum, holding safe the messages and mysteries of a people long gone. Discovery from the air for centuries, the Nazca lines lay hidden in plain sight. People walked across them, used the desert paths, and lived near them without ever realizing they were part of something larger. From the ground, a single line looked like nothing more than a trail in the sand. It wasn't until the 20th century, when airplanes first flew over southern Peru, that the mystery was revealed. Pilots looked down and were stunned. Giant animals, birds, and shapes stretched across the desert, perfectly formed and only visible from above. The world quickly took notice. What were these enormous figures doing in such a barren land? Who made them, and for what reason? The discovery sparked a wave of curiosity, leading scientists, explorers, and archaeologists to the Nazca Pampa. Suddenly, what once seemed like empty desert was known as one of the greatest archaeological wonders on Earth. The aerial view transformed the Nazca lines from forgotten marks into global treasures. Their size, beauty, and mystery captured imaginations everywhere. For the first time, humanity understood that long before flight, the Nazca had created something meant to be seen from the skies. Big theories about the lines. When the Nazca lines were first revealed from the air, their purpose became one of archaeology's biggest mysteries. Everyone agreed they were intentional, too precise, too large, and too strange to be random. But why would a people who never flew create pictures only visible from above? Many theories arose, and for decades, scholars debated their meaning. Some suggested the lines were a giant calendar used to track the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Others believed they were connected to water, the most precious resource in the desert, marking underground sources or honoring gods of rain and fertility. Another idea was that they were ritual walkways, paths for processions where people acted out ceremonies or myths. Still, each theory left questions. Could they truly map the heavens? Were they symbols of survival, guiding water rituals? Or were they sacred stages where communities came together? For a century, these possibilities fueled arguments and imagination alike. What was clear is that the Nazca lines were not random. They were messages written in the desert, waiting to be understood. Calendar of the Sky, one of the earliest and most famous ideas about the Nazca lines, was that they formed a giant calendar written on the desert floor. In 1939, American historian Paul Kosak noticed that some lines pointed directly to where the sun rose or set during the solstices. To him, the desert wasn't just empty land. It was the world's largest astronomy book. He believed the Nazca people used the lines to track the movement of the sun and stars, guiding them in planting, harvesting, and celebrating. This idea was later expanded by Maria Ricci, a German scientist who devoted her life to studying the lines. She carefully mapped them for decades, protecting them from damage while arguing that many shapes matched astronomical events. She saw hummingbirds, monkeys, and other figures as reflections of constellations or markers for the cycles of the sky. The thought of an ancient civilization turning the desert into a cosmic calendar captured global attention. It made the Nazca seem like brilliant sky watchers linking heaven to survival on Earth. Yet, while the theory explained some lines, it could not explain them all. Still, the idea of a calendar of the sky remains one of the most powerful stories tied to the Nazca lines. The water connection, another powerful idea, linked the Nazca lines not to the stars, but to water. The one thing the desert never gave freely. In a land where survival depended on hidden underground rivers, some researchers noticed that many lines seemed to point toward water sources or followed the paths of ancient canals. Spirals, zigzags, and flowing shapes looked less like stars in the sky and more like the movement of water beneath the earth. To the Nazca, water was life, and honoring it would have been as important as any ritual. The lines may have been drawn as sacred symbols to call for rain or to thank the gods for fertility of the land. Ceremonies could have taken place along these figures, with people walking the lines as prayers written into the soil. This theory turned the desert into more than just an observatory. It became a holy stage for rituals tied directly to survival. The idea that the Nazca carved their devotion into the earth itself made sense in a place where every drop of water was a treasure. While not every line fits this theory, the water connection shows how deeply the Nazca linked their art, their faith, and their survival. Ritual paths and walkways. As researchers studied the Nazca lines more closely, they noticed something unusual. Many of the lines showed signs of wear, as if people had walked along them again and again. This led to another theory, that the geoglyphs were not just pictures, but ceremonial paths. Long, straight lines and sweeping shapes may have been used as walkways for processions, where groups of people moved together in rituals. Walking the lines could have been a form of prayer, a way of honoring gods, or marking important times of the year. Processions along these giant shapes might have told stories, acted out myths, or celebrated seasonal changes. The desert floor became both stage and script, where movement itself was a sacred act. Unlike the star calendar or water markers, this idea made sense of the lines even from the ground. They didn't always need to be seen from above to hold meaning. To the Nazca, the act of walking them may have been more important than viewing the final shape. The lines then were not just symbols. They were experiences, sacred journeys traced by human footsteps. Limits of old research for decades. Most studies of the Nazca lines focused only on the largest, most perfect figures: the hummingbird, the spider, the monkey, and the long straight paths. These massive shapes could be seen clearly from the air, photographed, and studied easily. Because of this, early theories often explained only these famous geoglyphs while ignoring smaller, faded, or broken ones. The problem was that the desert held far more than just a handful of giant images. Many geoglyphs were rougher, less symmetrical, or partly destroyed. Others were too small to notice from planes or too hidden to stand out in photographs. Since there was no fast way to scan the entire desert, countless designs were overlooked. Researchers unintentionally created a biased picture of the Nazca, focusing only on the beautiful and ignoring the imperfect. This meant entire parts of the Nazca story were missing. By concentrating only on neat astronomical alignments or ceremonial patterns, scholars left out figures that did not fit those categories. Without tools to detect every design, many clues stayed buried in plain sight. The desert was filled with answers, but human eyes alone were not enough to see them all. AI joins the hunt. By the late 1900s. Archaeologists knew the Nazca Desert still hid countless geoglyphs, but finding them was slow and exhausting. The pampas stretched for hundreds of square kilometers, and every aerial photo had to be studied by eye. Even the best teams missed details, and each overlooked mark risked being lost forever to erosion, construction, or time. It was clear that human effort alone would never reveal the full picture. In 2018, Professor Masato Sakai partnered with IBM Japan to try something new: artificial intelligence. Using high-resolution drone and satellite images, researchers divided the desert into millions of tiny squares. These were fed into AI systems trained to spot shapes, patterns, and contrasts invisible to the human eye. Unlike people, the AI never grew tired or distracted. It could scan thousands of images at once, catching even faint curves or broken lines. But machines did not work alone. After AI flagged possible sites, archaeologists spent over 200 hours walking the desert to confirm them. The results were extraordinary. In only 6 months, AI identified more than 300 new geoglyphs, nearly doubling the known number. For the first time, technology allowed us to see the Nazca Desert as a whole, and it changed everything. 300 new figures. The use of AI in the Nazca Desert brought astonishing results. In just 6 months, researchers uncovered 303 new geoglyphs, almost as many as had been found in the previous 15 years of traditional study. The discovery nearly doubled the known collection, raising the total from about 400 to more than 700 figures. But it wasn't just the number that surprised archaeologists. It was the nature of these new finds. Unlike the famous hummingbird or spider, most of the new geoglyphs were small, rough, and very different in style. Many measured only 3 to 7 meters wide, meaning you could stand next to one and see its entire shape. They weren't meant to impress the sky. They were meant to be seen and experienced from the ground. Some showed strange humanoid figures with oversized heads and twisted limbs, while others depicted local animals or even severed heads, symbols that may have carried ritual meaning. These discoveries revealed that the Nazca Lines were not a single grand project with one purpose. Instead, they were a collection of messages from many communities, created for many reasons. The desert was not just a stage for gods above. It was a living canvas filled with personal, local, and spiritual expressions. What the new shapes mean: the 300 new geoglyphs changed how we see the Nazca. Unlike the giant,